I'm really, really grateful that she stuck with us all the way through this, because that very night I tweeted that podcast and she got back to me and said thanks for the kind words, and it's gone from there. You know, and Kit came later, but Rachel was right there, right that catalyst moment for me, at least. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand over, shut myself down and say welcome, Rachel, and thank you very much for being here and opening day 2.
Thank you. That was a really good introduction. Yeah, really pleased with it. I always feel really chuffed when I get a really nice intro. But yeah, hi everyone. Firstly, thanks so much for having me speak at this event. I'm really honoured to be a part of it. I am by no means an academic. In fact, I went to university as first generation, struggled massively for 3 years and left with an average degree in politics and no real steps to thinking as to what was next for me. In hindsight, my university journey was not only kind of plagued by the common feeling of I don't belong, or, you know, this isn't a place for me, I don't really fit in. But I can honestly, truly say, I think part of it was because that's the first time I'd ever been asked my opinion, and I had no idea what to do. I just couldn't do it. And I'd never been encouraged to be a critical thinker before, though I really do think if I went now, I'd absolutely kill it, and I'd never be able to stop sharing my opinion. And I just think it's really essential and generally a really great thing that a group of working class academics are using this platform. And I hope that it not only gains the recognition that it deserves, but sparks the feeling amongst working class students, if only it's just one, that they certainly do belong in higher education and they really matter. So usually when asked to give a speech or be a keynote or be a panellist, you're really encouraged by the organisers to share your story, which is what I did for the BBC Radio 4 speech that Pete just mentioned, to kind of just make it about yourself. And storytelling, I think, is a really powerful tool. And whilst it can make you quite vulnerable, your experiences of society's, or some of society's most pressing issues, is what really gives them life, and it's what makes people wake up. And I'd never really considered myself as being worthy of having a story at all. And I can really credit my time at Reclaim, which is a youth leadership and social change charity based in Manchester, working with working class young people. I actually think I can see that Becky from Reclaim is on this call. Has been a time when I just turned my story on and I just knew exactly who I was, and everything that I learned there is what I should have learned at university. So yeah, they really encouraged me to recognise myself as not only a leader but someone who's worthy of having a voice and a story. But recently I saw someone question on Twitter that said, can you talk about class inequality without talking about your own experience? And I really felt that. I think that's really important. It's definitely really important to me. So last year when I did the speech at BBC Radio 4, it was at Green Man Festival. And I was encouraged again to talk about myself and my own journey. And I really enjoyed it, and it was received very well. I only got one person on the internet calling me a brat. But yeah, for a short while it was a kind of confidence boost that I needed, and I really felt much more engaged in the class conversation again. However, I did intend to use that platform to talk about the struggle as a whole, not just my experience. So on that actually really sunny and nice day at Green Man, I got a free ticket and got to see really nice music. I managed to skim the surface of 2 issues within working class discourse that actually I'd like to use this platform today to talk about as well. And I'd be really up for conversation afterwards, and questions and just general chat, because I'm really excited to be here. But those are trans liberation as a class struggle and the intersection of race and class. So right now, we're not only in unprecedented, the most annoying word at the moment, but revolutionary times. We're facing a really uncertain future, but also a certainty that we need to fight for the most oppressed, and that Black lives do matter. And the failure for us to recognise in British history, the history of the empire, and even the historic governments that are generally well liked or received, the purposeful segregation by the British state of Irish and European migrants and those from Commonwealth countries, continues to manifest itself in working class communities today. I think not just through the atrocities of incidents such as the Windrush generation, but a constant push by the media that there's an existence of the white working class, or that the working class are a homogenous group that are generally white. Seen a lot of politicians use traditional working class, which generally would accept as a racist term. But generations of non-white working class people who rightfully point out that this is dangerous are accused of being divisive or playing up to identity politics. And I really think that it's our responsibility of people who are engaged in the class conversation to not only recognise but encourage the discourse, but also fight for anyone who faces further class marginalisation because of their race. And secondly, the fight for trans inclusion and democratic rights for me is also central to the class struggle. Again, for trans people, their fight for authentic identities continues to be dismissed as identity politics and individualism. We really need to reject any proposal that their identity is invalid. There are many forms of which trans oppression exists, not least the struggle to be authentically recognised, the increasingly high rates of violence and incarceration, but actually also the deep economic marginalisation that they face. Trans people in the US face unemployment at a rate at least 3 times higher than the national average. A third of UK employers said that they wouldn't hire trans workers. And whilst unemployment rates amongst trans people aren't monitored in the UK, in 2018, The Guardian said that 50% of trans people in Ireland are unemployed. The actual cost of transitioning is very high, but for a lot of trans people, it feels essential in order to be deemed even appropriate for the workplace. And I think that, again, I don't want to make it this whole thing about my journey, but I think that something that I touched on, if people haven't experienced or heard before, certainly everyone's heard of imposter syndrome. And I think it's important to recognise that the two groups that I've just discussed certainly face imposter syndrome every day. But I think that my failure to recognise myself as a leader came from that imposter syndrome. And it's something that people experience at some point in their lives, the kind of feeling of, how did I look out? I'm not qualified or worthy. I kind of find that when I'm invited to places like this or events like this and asked to speak. But yeah, the kind of like the feeling of like being, I'm the world's biggest chancer in the face of any form of success, particularly for anyone who's facing various forms of oppression. But as I said in my previous speech, and it's something that I strongly stand by, I think there's something more deep rooted in feeling like you're either grossly underqualified or unworthy. For a long time, I kept rejecting opportunities to speak on panels, to do keynote speeches, to discuss something that I really care about. You know, I've spoken in Parliament and on various media outlets across the country, and on a topic that I feel has helped me, shaped me as a person. It's really shaped my politics, my individual politics, the way that I see the world, the things that I laugh at, the things that I care about, my love for the royal family, the programme The Royal Family, not the royal family. That has really shaped me. I stopped talking about it. I had such an incredible time listening and learning and understanding other people's beliefs and experience of class. And I felt so proud that I could contribute in my own way. And in all of those instances, I kind of anticipated that the imposter syndrome would kick in, and I'd be really panicky that I would flop and that no one would understand what I was talking about. But actually that never came, because I was so confident in my own ability to talk about a topic that I'd experienced, that I hardly did any speech preparation. I was probably really arrogant about it, but I spoke really passionately and with a lot of authenticity, which is I think is really important. The imposter feeling never came, and I knew that it was something that I was talking about things that I'd experienced, and I wasn't grossly underqualified. In fact, I felt somewhat of an expert, and I'm really encouraged that people with lived experience should be recognised for their expertise. But yeah, as I said, I went kind of hiding in the background, supporting other people to do really great work. I've got, really close people who are really close to me who are doing great work around class and race and gender and yeah, lots of amazing stuff. But none of that was because I felt like an imposter. I think it was more so that I was terrified of being successful. And again, that probably sounds really strange, but a while ago I was introduced to the theory of Jonah complex, which is the idea that somebody can be so scared of their own ability or potential success that they kind of avoid everything that they care about or that they have a talent for. And the fear of recognizing yourself as someone who might be successful in whatever form that may be is so overwhelmingly terrifying that you just do absolutely nothing instead. And last year, no, 2 years ago, I got the opportunity to start my own program that I was really passionate about. Was about campaigns training to women from council estates in Manchester. I'm from a council estate in Manchester. It's really important to me, and I just avoided it at all costs and kind of silenced it because I was scared of being successful. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that a lot of my working class friends feel the same. But I think it has everything to do with the way that identity and the way we view class and success and how they meet, and the kind of obsession that we have around social mobility and transcending class barriers. For me, I really think that social mobility is a myth. I think that the constant pushing of a narrative that promotes the idea that working class people can only be successful if they escape their background, if they leave the area that they're from, if they, you know, leave their family and friends behind and become this new person and not this like new middle class persona, but that's what makes them successful. And I think for a lot of working class people, to have to question their whole identity and authenticity on the basis of being successful and whatever that means, for me just really doesn't sit well. So I guess that's where I'm at today. I'm still on the periphery of getting involved in things, but this has been a real confidence boost for me, and I'm really happy to be here with everybody, and everybody's work seems just outstanding, and I just feel really grateful and humbled to be a part of it. And I'd really like to chat to everybody if there's any questions.
Thanks, Rachel. That was brilliant. There are some questions, so if you'd rather, I can just like hang about here and read them out to you, because people who are delegates can type a question, but obviously because of the video and all the rest of it, they can't actually speak them out.
Yeah.
So
that would be really helpful. I'm actually really bobbins with technology.
Yeah. So you just sit there and be you, and then I'll do the Graham Norton bit. So right. So to what extent, this is from Craig Hammond, who was a speaker yesterday. To what extent can or should class become the main vehicle to unite intersectional differences to pursue positive and structural social change? I'm glad I got that out, Craig. So, can you read that as well, Rachel? You don't have to. I'm going to say.
Is that on the Q&A? Oh yeah, I can see that. Sorry, I'm not good with Zoom. I'm a really bad millennial. To what extent can or should class become the main vehicle to unite intersectional differences to achieve? I think it's a kind of a common thing on the left for people to kind of focus on class, or encourage that class is the most important thing and everything else is divisive, which is really dangerous. I think that I think it's really important that people recognise first and foremost that working class isn't a homogenous group. I think that is probably where we need to focus our energy. As the things that I outlined in the changing stuff with trans liberation, but also the kind of deep-rooted racism that exists on the left and exists when we talk about class in general. So I think that class is obviously really important and is and should be a vehicle to kind of influence in structural and social change. But I think it kind of needs to be a bit more revolutionary than that, and we really need to, particularly in places like unions, rid ourselves of the history of deep-rooted racism and sexism.
Great answer. Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to move down to Kirsty's comment, which just disappeared the minute I said that. She says, Rachel, thanks so much for bringing up trans rights and racism as also a class issue. Noting that a lot of spaces centred around class are predominantly white and straight led, how do you think we can better centre the voices of BIPOC and trans folk in spaces?
Yeah, I think that, I think all activist spaces, no matter what topic they're discussing, are just predominantly white and straight led. I think even a lot of class discussions even have a lot of white straight middle class people in them. Somebody who an organisation that I really respect and I would really encourage people to read, that kind of, not like an introduction manual, I just made it sound really unexciting, is Sisters Uncut. Sisters Uncut started in London and kind of campaigned, if people don't know, to save Holloway Prison, and are kind of fighting against cuts to domestic violence support. They opened a branch in Manchester, and actually every time that you attend, you kind of read from this statement, and you have to kind of adopt this idea that that this is a space that is welcoming of all genders, of every identity. And I think kind of like really pushing that at the start. I think I've been to a lot of really great places where collectively a manifesto of how we want to work, or how, you know, is best to work, or how best to have the space be safe. I think a lot of spaces as well just say that this is a safe space, and then that's not actually the point of it. The point of it is collectively to come up with it. And I think a lot of it as well will be a lot along the lines of encouraging the white people in the room to critically think about why it's important that sometimes they do take a step back. And that's not me absolving myself of any kind of like responsibility there. I recognise that I am also included in that bracket. But yeah, if anyone has a chance reading Sisters Uncut's manifesto, they do a really good job of making sure that the space is as inclusionary as possible.
Thank you, Rachel. Claire's put some points in, and they're lengthy, and rather than questions, they're points. So I think I'll leave those for you to read later on, but they are well worth reading. I've been listening to you, but then scanning the first one, and there's quite a few more of them, and they're really interesting points. Lou Mycroft asks, which is it's a targeted question: how can we enable people to be thinkers? This is my work, I do my best, but I absolutely know I am not winning with people in my own community, and I get that from Lou. So I understand that too. So what do you think about that, Rachel? Because it's a similar experience I think you're describing. But what do you think? How do we stop people?
Yeah.
Or how do we? I heard the term yesterday on the radio, and it was that it was a rugby guy who was talking about, do we call people out or call people in? Do you know, and what's the distinction between that? Do you call people out for being racist, or do you call them in to encourage them to be different? What's your thoughts? And in Lou's terms, encourage them to be thinkers.
I think everything that I learned about encouraging people to be thinkers, again, I learned at Reclaim, is actually not just at Reclaim, at places I've worked at a tenants union as well, and everything is very much about people recognizing that they have potential and capacity to be a leader in their community. I think when organizations or people, or like academic institutions or whatever, people just parachute into a community and kind of don't take into consideration the history and the context of the area, what people do feel, why they feel that way, what they're good at, what they care about. I think kind of encouraging that growth first, and kind of encouraging people to be proud of the area that they're from, or proud of their community, whatever community that is, and to kind of adopt that persona of, I am a leader, I am someone who can influence change in my community, and to then break out into further discussion, to kind of get the ball rolling first, to then have like quite intense critical conversations of various different topics.
Okay.
But again, as I said before, like allowing that space to be a space for everybody. Sometimes it can get quite dangerous. And sorry, did I lose internet connection then?
Yeah, no, we could hear you, but you're
okay.
green froze.
Was that just still? Okay. Yeah, so I think that taking the initial steps first to kind of get to know people, get to know where they're at, and encourage that leadership journey.
Okay, thank you. I'm just asking, I'm going to try and get a question from Claire that sums all that up, because the rest are just great points here, but it is so long and we've only got a few, 5 minutes maybe. Paul's put something on, and it's not quite a question, although it is. I think it's the Jonah complex. And when you said that in your podcast, I'd like you to talk a bit more about that, because I think regardless of where you are in working class terms, that fear of failure, actually it seems a really strange thing. And then when you say it, there is a realization, you know, that who do you think you are thing, and like, well, if I do that, then I'm no longer me thing. Talk to us about that, Rachel, because I think that's really
I guess that you know, if I do that, then I'm no longer me thing really sums it up well. Is that everything that you've ever known, when we kind of like talk about social mobility and the idea that education is as a tool of social mobility, I think what we do generally mean is that in order to be successful in what society deems to be successful, then you have to uproot everything you've known if what you've known doesn't fit into the narrative of successful. And that's a really scary thing, to have to completely change your identity, to kind of, you know, physically leave your community. A lot of people who maybe have to like move to London, as an example. I think that having to change who you are fundamentally in order to be, you know, whether that's financially stable, whether it's, you know, to do the thing that you really care about. I think that also, as somebody has put as well, that, you know, it's kind of embarrassing. You do feel embarrassed. You feel like it kind of makes your skin crawl to be like, oh, like I'm doing well. I'm not someone who does well. I think it's subjective. Like, for me it is exactly what you said, that like having to change who you are in order to fit a narrative is really scary.
Okay, thank you. I like that very much. I've got a question. Well, Stephen and Teresa. So I guess it may be just Stephen, might just be Teresa. He said, "Who do I think I am? Many members of my family, mainly the men, have never engaged or discussed my move from building sites to academia. Literally, not a word in over 20 years. Just Steve. It's just Steve. And actually, it's a thing that I'm totally conscious of. Do you think, so on two things, to bring the two things together, I think on one level, the power of working class academics is we can change what working class people are seen to be doing. You know, we are the people that can talk about the big issues that you opened with. Do you know, do you have to be of this class and only talk about this class, or you're like, so can we change that? And then, as Paul says, well, it's quite a difficult thing because people just think you've disappeared. It's like, oh yeah, that. Do you know, it becomes an invisible space. What do you think?
Well, I think that it's important to, one, as I said before, pushing a narrative that people who've got lived experience are experts, but also that there's a lot of discussion, maybe constantly on Twitter, that there's a need for academics to kind of use their platform more to talk about issues. And I think that having this kind of like working class academics conference, or at least having a group of people who are working class academics, feels for me quite new. I've not known anything like that before, and I think it's a really big step in the right direction of people using their platform that they've taken different journeys to get to, but have also along the way experienced both sides, really. I think that we've had conversations before about working in an FE college, for example, or an FE institution, that people have got loads of different experiences, and I think that if you have a position like you do as an academic, then influencing wider conversation is kind of essential, because for a lot of people who are kind of experts by experience aren't taken seriously a lot of the time. So when the two collide, I think that's really powerful. And yeah, I just really commend everyone for being part of this.
Thank you. I'm going to close with two things. One is I want you to respond to it. We've only got a minute or so. But Lisa Appleyard-Keeling, I think, Lisa, we were on Twitter about this last night, innit? But she, can she make the point about disability studies and ableism? And I think it is something that it doesn't get mentioned so much in the fierce energy of non-phobic discussion. And actually, because of that, becomes left behind a little bit. And do you think that's something you've experienced? Is it something you're aware of? What can we do around that, Rachel, in your model of thinking and your way of thinking?
Yeah, no, I definitely is something I've experienced. I am a disabled person, and I have worked with mixed groups of people, and certainly recognise that, yeah, as we said before, that spaces aren't necessarily designed for people to have a platform, when actually that's essential. That's what we should be doing. I think, again, encouraging the leadership journey has been really kind of fruitful when faced with that. If that actually, like, you don't, I hate to talk about like resilience or like the kind of things that you've experienced that kind of contribute to what makes you as the rightful person to be talking on a topic. But yeah, I really recognize that, and I think I just kind of picked those two topics because there's something that I've kind of witnessed recently. So I wasn't like kind of saying that they're like the most important ones. I just wanted to clarify. But yeah.
Thank you. We've actually got longer than we thought, because central control, as Alex is now called, after Paul yesterday called her that, I'm going to stay with it forever. Is it possible that we make Claire a panelist for a second central control, and then she can maybe summarise some of her points to a question to Rachel? Is that okay with everybody? Claire, are you okay with that? If you just type in chat yes or no, I won't linger on the points if it's a no. But we'll do that if it's a yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes. Hello, welcome. Are you straight through? You're in. I feel like a radio guy.
That's great. I wanted to say it's just really brilliant to see this group and just a kind of movement in a way of academics really gathering force, and it's fantastic to see a conference emerge and to see these discussions and so on. I've just been moaning in some of the chat about I've been trying to set up a group at LSE, and our equalities office doesn't get it and won't support me. And I went to UCU and they're doing the same. So they're just completely turning me down. They won't even circulate a call to faculty. So that's just really frustrating, but I'm not taking no for an answer. But the point I was trying to make is, and I suppose it's one for general consideration for the group rather than specifically to Rachel, but Rachel, I'm sure, will have something to say about it. And it's about how we might be thoughtful about the varieties of working class experience, and the fact that the working class is not a homogenous group. It's actually quite divided in many ways. I'm from what Engels called labour aristocracy, and I know it's a really debated concept. I think it's useful in some ways, but this is a kind of upper working class, skilled manual work. They had decent wage, good pensions, and probably were quite a lot closer to the middle classes than the lower working classes. And in many ways, I experienced the class divide between the lower and upper working classes as harder actually than that between the upper working classes and lower middle classes. And there are interesting political debates around this, because the upper working classes were generally quite conservative and amenable to being bought out or co-opted as sub-rulers. And this was a kind of classic divide and rule sort of situation, I think. But I think these intra-class dynamics can be lost in these more generalized discussions, and they contribute to quite different experiences of moving from a working class family or community into more typically middle and elite class arenas of life and employment. So I just think it's something that would be interesting for us to discuss, to really think about the varieties of working class experience, and also those intra class divisions. That's it, really.
Thank you, Claire. I'm glad you got to speak that, and they are fascinating points. Rachel, how would you respond?
I guess it kind of makes me think about the section that I highlighted of what a traditional working class means, and yeah, how I don't know. I guess I haven't really thought about it before, but I think when I think about the history of working class people and as you said, the kind of like divisions, I think the divisions are starkly different now to what they historically were, and I think it's really important, as I said, for us to kind of recognize the role that like the empire has played in that, and kind of how that deep-rooted historical racism and etc. Has caused the division that we need to really focus on currently. I guess, yeah, I'm not really an expert in the kind of the labour.
Well, I don't know anybody that is. I don't think anyone is, and I think part of it is probably being authors and of our own narratives, and I don't mean just that as a glib thing. We had a great presentation yesterday you would have loved by Christian Bell, where he talked about narrative harvesting, you know, where you get these approaches of going into communities and taking everybody's stories and then doing something else with them, and like just leaving, you know, no response to the stories, just take the stories. And I think, yeah, it's a very complex thing, but I actually like, as Claire came in at the beginning and as you've sparked this, there is a need for a collective, and I really thank you for coming in today. And we're at 9:55 now. That flew by. That went so quickly. We could stay and talk all morning, but I'm just going to say thank you very, very much for coming, Rachel. It's a real pleasure to speak and chat with you. And like, I mean, it's a big public forum now rather than on a phone call. But thank you for everything over the last 7 months. It's been an inspiration. You are an inspiration, and this is your doing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've just seen there's 149 participants. That's loads.
600 registered. It's been incredible.
That's great. Yeah, no, I'm really glad. I'm going to have a bit of food and then I'm going to come back actually.
Yeah, do and you're welcome all day, and yeah, it will be lovely to see you and hear from you again. Okay, we'll go over now. Thank you, Rachel. Loads of really brilliant comments coming in chat, so go and read those. I'll send them to you later on as well, so including Claire's questions, I hope.